On the 21st of February 1849, the British and Sikhs fought one last great battle. At stake, the independence of the last major independent state still opposing British rule in India. The result would lead to a sad life for a young boy, a controversial addition to Britain's crown jewels, and would change India forever. Welcome to my story about the Battle of Gujrat in 1849. Hi, this is the last episode in my mini-series about the Anglo-Sikh Wars. But before I tell you about the battle itself, I thought it might be useful to spend a couple of minutes providing the backdrop to our story. The Sikh kingdom of Punjab, established by Singh in the early 19th century, was the last military obstacle to the British gaining control of India. And it was one heck of an obstacle. Its large army, the Khalsa, had been modelled and trained on European lines. Armed with modern muskets and a formidable arsenal of artillery, they were every bit as equal to the army of the British East India Company, as they would prove when they eventually fought each other. The Sikhs and the British East India Company finally came to blows in 1845. The First Anglo-Sikh War ended in a British victory the following year, but it had been a hard-fought war and could have gone either way. Indeed, many Sikhs felt that they'd only lost due to the treachery of some of their leaders. Nevertheless, the peace treaty at the end of that war resulted in the Punjab and its infant Maharaja, Duleep Singh, remaining nominally independent of the British Empire, or more specifically the East India Company, although its army, the Khalsa, was greatly reduced, and British officials were stationed in the kingdom to provide advice. The imposition of the British officials, the belief they'd never actually lost the war in the first place, and a simmering resentment of that treaty the British had forced the Punjab to sign in 1846 was a gathering storm. And that storm erupted at the southern city of Multan in April 1848. Sikh troops loyal to their former governor turned on his replacement and his two British advisors, the latter being hacked to death. When a British Sikh army was sent to the city, the Sikh contingent under Sher Singh Atariwalla joined the revolt. Rather than staying in the city, however, Sher Singh moved north back into the Punjab heartlands, hoping to join forces with his father, Chatta Singh Atariwalla, who was also risen in revolt. With the Punjab moving from being a semi-client to openly anti-British hostility, the East India Company now acted. A British army made up of regular British troops and men from the East India Company's own army entered the Sikh kingdom. They were commanded by General Gough. 1 year short of his 70th birthday, the Irishman was a veteran of the Napoleonic Wars and had commanded the British army during the First Anglo-Sikh War. Now, those of you who followed my episodes on these Anglo-Sikh Wars might recall that Gough's single military tactic was to send in his infantry in full frontal bayonet charges against entrenched Sikh cannon. He continued that tactic in this latest campaign with almost calamitous results. After an inconclusive battle at Ramnagar, Gough launched his infantry in a full frontal attack on the Sikh positions at Chillianwalla on the 13th of January 1849. The battle was very nearly his undoing. The Sikhs drove back his army, inflicting 2,500 casualties. And also during the battle, the 24th Regiment of Foot lost their Queen's colour. When the news of those losses reached London, it caused consternation both in the press and in government circles, especially as half of all those casualties were British redcoats, rather than the East India Company sepoys. Within 48 hours, Gough had been fired and a new commander, Major General Charles Napier, had been ordered to proceed to India as his replacement. However, due to the slow communications of the day, that news both to London and then back to Gough took time, and by the time Napier arrived in India, General Gough had achieved his last and arguably greatest victory at the Battle of Gujrat, which neatly brings us to our story today. Following the Battle of Chillianwalla, Sher Singh had tried to goad Gough into yet another attack, and you might be surprised to find out that Gough refused to take the bait. Instead, he decided to wait for the army that was besieging Multan to finish their task and then join up with him. While they waited, the British heard a 21-gun salute being fired in the Sikh camp. It heralded the arrival of Sher's father at the head of his army. He was also accompanied by 1,500 Afghan horsemen, commanded by the son of the Emir of Afghanistan, Dost Muhammad Khan. Far from natural allies, the Afghans had decided to throw in their lot with the Sikhs in the hope of recovering the city of Peshawar, which they'd lost to the Sikhs under Ranjit Singh back in the 1820s. This new enlarged Sikh army, possibly up to 60,000 strong, quickly stripped the local area of food. Having tried and failed to outflank Gough, father and son Natariwala broke camp on the 25th of January and moved 30 miles to the east, taking up a new position outside the city of Gujrat. Now, just for clarity, the city of Gujrat, sometimes spelt Gujarat in the 19th century, lies in modern-day Pakistan and is nothing to do with the state of Gujarat in India. On the very day that the Sikhs broke camp, over in the British camp, General Gough heard that Multan had finally fallen. The besieging British army under General Wish and its heavy guns could now join him against Sher Singh. By the 20th of February, General Wish had arrived with 3 brigades to enlarge Gough's army. Included in these brigades were the 10th Regiment of Foot, later the Lincolnshire Regiment, and the 32nd Regiment of Foot, later the 1st Battalion, Duke of Cornwall's Light Infantry, both from the British Army. Alongside them were 6 regiments of Bengal Native Infantry too. That same day, Brigadier Dundas had also joined Gough with a brigade from the East India Company's Bombay Army, consisting of the 3rd and 19th Bombay Native Infantry, the 1st Bombay European Fusiliers, and the 60th Rifles. The European regiments are a forgotten part of Indian and British Empire military history. Part of the East India Company's army rather than the British Army, these regiments, unlike the more famous and numerous sepoy units, were made up entirely of European, principally British and Irish, soldiers. When the British government took over direct rule from the East India Company in the late 1850s, these regiments were either disbanded or moved into the regular British Army. So, the 1st Bombay European Fusiliers, for instance, became part of the Royal Dublin Fusiliers. And the 2nd Bengal European Fusiliers, who were also to fight at Gujrat, later became the Royal Munster Fusiliers. Their long and convoluted history ended with Irish independence in 1922. Gough now had an army of approximately 24,000 men. He also possessed 96 guns, which was almost double the number and also a heavier calibre than the Sikhs possessed. He now advanced on Sher Singh's army at Gujrat. Sher Singh had positioned his army about 3 miles south of the city. His 59 guns were interspersed with his infantry in a double line of entrenchments dug between 2 dried-up riverbeds, or nullahs. Unlike at Chillianwalla, his position didn't have the advantage of being concealed by scrub and jungle, and Sher Singh had been forced to hastily plant bushes in front of his entrenchments in an attempt to mask the details of his defences, and to create another barrier for Gough's, almost inevitable bayonet charge. He'd also fortified some villages lying in front of their lines, but which to the British observers looked deserted. More of that in a moment. Early on the morning of the 21st of February 1849, General Gough formed up his men. On his left, looking to outflank the Sikh entrenchments, was the 3rd Division under Major General Sir Colin Campbell. It consisted of Dundas's Bombay Brigade, along with the 25th and 46th Bengal Native Infantry, and the British 61st and 24th Regiments of Foot. And of course, it was the 24th, the 2nd Warwickshires, who had taken heavy casualties at Chillianwalla and had lost their colours. The 24th would also later fight at both the battles of Isandlwana and Rorke's Drift in the Zulu War. To the right and facing the main Sikh positions was General Gilbert's 2nd Infantry Division, consisting of the 29th Regiment of Foot, later the 1st Battalion Worcestershire Regiment, along with those Bengal European Fusiliers, and 4 regiments of sepoys, one of which, for my Indian viewers, the 70th, is now the 5th Battalion of the Rajput Regiment in the Indian Army. And then finally to his right was General Wish and his division, brought up from the siege of Multan. As Gough's soldiers stared towards the partially concealed Sikh positions, the snow-capped Himalayas rose in the distance, giving a dramatic backdrop to the forthcoming battle. And now, wearing his famous white fighting coat, Gough rode down the line. Despite the casualties from his full frontal attacks, you might be surprised to know that the Irishman was hugely popular with his men, because he had a constant care for their welfare, well, apart from those attacks, and personally he was seen as very brave. As he rode down the line, he was enthusiastically cheered by his men. And then he ordered the advance. When Gough's army passed the abandoned village of Chillianwalla, the Sikh artillery batteries opened up at a range of 2,000 yards. Whilst they had little impact at this range, they had shown their positions. And now Gough did something completely out of character. Unlike previous battles with the Sikhs, he chose not to send his infantry into a frontal attack with bayonets against those guns. Instead, he ordered his own gun batteries forward ahead of the infantry, and now an artillery duel opened between the two sides. It would last 2.5 hours, and some Sikh and Indian historians have called Gujrat the Battle of the Guns. Outnumbered and outgunned, the Sikhs nevertheless were able to hit the British gun crews and the infantry moving up in support. One troop from the Bengal Horse Artillery lost 8 men killed and 23 wounded, along with 38 of their horses killed or injured. A constant line of dolis, which are covered stretchers, kept ferrying the wounded back to the field hospital at the rear. But eventually, the Sikh fire began to slacken. Now Gough unleashed his infantry to seize the villages in front of the Sikh lines. Whilst the British had presumed that the villages were empty, the Sikhs had in fact turned them into veritable strongpoints. As the red-coated British and sepoy infantry advanced, they suddenly came under a withering musket fire from windows and loopholes in the villages. Colonel Andrew Harvey's brigade, consisting of the 10th Regiment of Foot and the 8th and 52nd Bengal Native Infantry, suffered 150 casualties as they cleared Chotra Kalra village. Meanwhile, over at the village of Burra Kalra, sometimes spelt Barra Kalra, the 2nd Bengal European Fusiliers, plus the 31st and 70th Bengal Native Infantry, pushed through despite stubborn resistance. They were then met with a Sikh counterattack which drove them back until halted by artillery fire from the Bengal Horse Artillery. The brigade took 300 casualties, securing the tiny village. Over on Gough's left, following an artillery bombardment, Colin Campbell's division pressed through 3 more villages, outflanking the main Sikh defences. This enabled the British artillery, well actually it was the Bengal and Bombay artillery, to move up and deliver enfilade fire. Sher Singh now sought to save the situation by ordering his cavalry, including those Afghan horsemen, to charge Campbell's position. As his mounted men raced forward, they were suddenly met by the 9th Lancers and the Sindh Irregular Horse in a countercharge that drove them back. It was at this moment that Gough's Irish luck almost ran out. A group of Sikh cavalry dashed around to the British right, intending to attack Gough himself. Initially, when he saw them, Gough thought they were irregular horsemen on the British side, and it was only as they closed in on his headquarters that he suddenly realised the ghastly truth. In the ensuing fight, the ageing Gough personally drew his pistol to fire on his attackers, and for a few anxious moments it looked like they might break through. Finally, the 5th Bengal Light Cavalry galloped to the rescue, and the attackers were wiped out to a man. All over the battlefield, the Sikh army started to fall back. Unlike previous battles, both in this war and in the First Anglo-Sikh War a few years beforehand, when the Sikhs had withdrawn in good order, today their retreat turned into a flight. As the Sikhs fled the field, the British entered Gujrat itself, and after some bitter street fighting, captured the city. Gough's cavalry, accompanied by some of the Bengal Horse Artillery, now pursued the Sikhs for a further 12 miles beyond Gujrat, denying Sher Singh any opportunity to regroup. The Battle of Gujrat, unlike the near disaster at Chillianwalla, was an emphatic British victory. It was estimated that the Sikhs lost 2,000 men, killed, wounded and captured, and nearly all of their guns. Gough's losses were 92 dead and 683 wounded, most of those trying to clear those villages. Many of the wounded were saved from a painful and lingering death by the very first use of anaesthetics on a British battlefield. Corporal John Ryder watched in amazement as a wounded soldier's leg was amputated, and the man knew nothing about what was going on. The following day, General Gilbert, with a mixed force of infantry, cavalry and artillery, nearly 15,000 strong, set off in pursuit of Sher Singh and the remnants of his army. For the next 3 days, they pushed the Sikh commander back 50 miles. On the 14th of March 1849, Sher Singh surrendered along with 16,000 of his men to General Gilbert at Rawalpindi. Sir Colin Campbell, who was present at the surrender, recalled seeing an old soldier of the Khalsa lay down his weapon, salute, and utter, "Today Ranjit Singh is dead." Sher Singh and his father were exiled and never returned to their homeland. A week later, Gilbert set off again, this time in pursuit of the Afghan cavalry. Crossing the Indus River, he occupied Peshawar on the 21st of March, and the Afghans fled home through the Khyber Pass. The Afghans would sign a treaty with the British relinquishing their claims to Peshawar and the region around it, and the city would become a central point in British India's northwest frontier. On the 2nd of April 1849, Punjab was annexed into the British Empire. The Sikh Empire, established by Ranjit Singh, was no more. Neither was there any remaining military power to oppose the East India Company on the subcontinent. The process of conquest, begun by Robert Clive nearly 100 years beforehand, was complete. The British were the undisputed masters of India. The victorious Gough told his men, "That which Alexander attempted, the British army have accomplished." The 69-year-old had fought his last and arguably his best battle. Apart from the Duke of Wellington, he had fought more battles than any man in the British army then living. He returned to Britain a hero. The Duke of Wellington, who had previously lambasted his frontal attacks and resulting casualties, now described his campaign against the Sikhs as brilliant in the extreme. The satirical magazine Punch, which had previously labelled him an incompetent octogenarian, now called him the gallant veteran. Raised to the peerage as Viscount Gough, he retired with the rank of Field Marshal to his estate in Ireland. He died in 1869, aged 89. Two of his nephews and a great-nephew would all be awarded Victoria Crosses, the only family ever to achieve that honour, and I've told their story in a previous episode, so check it out afterwards. Almost immediately after the Punjab had been annexed, the British, impressed by their fighting abilities, had started to recruit Sikh soldiers into the East India Company army. Now, some historians have wondered if their near victory over Gough had proved that whilst ultimately victorious, the British were not infallible, and that in turn may have influenced the willingness of Indians, both sepoys and others, to rise against the British in the Great Mutiny or Great Revolt in 1857. But if it did, it's worth noting that the Sikhs themselves didn't use the opportunity to reclaim their independence. The Sikh soldiers remained loyal to the British and fought against the rebels. The annexation of Punjab saw the 10-year-old Maharaja Duleep Singh deposed by the British. He was sent to England, where he converted to Christianity, and where Queen Victoria personally took an interest in his upbringing, and she had actually become godmother to two of his children. Incidentally, one of his children, Sophia Duleep Singh, actually became a suffragette and would work as a nurse during the First World War. Duleep Singh grew up to be a disillusioned, almost playboy former ruler. His country estate at Elverdon near Thetford in Suffolk became well known for his lavish game shoots. As he grew older, he reconverted to Sikhism and lobbied for a return to his homeland. However, the British authorities only allowed him to visit India briefly on 2 occasions. The first time to be reunited with his mother, and the second for her cremation. Increasingly disillusioned with British rule in India, and more specifically in Punjab, he eventually left England to live in Paris, where he died in 1893, aged 55. Refused a burial in India, he was instead laid to rest in the churchyard at Elvendon near his country estate in Suffolk. In 1999, Prince Charles, as he then was, unveiled an equestrian statue to Duleep in the nearby market town of Thetford. The words on the statue say, "Even today, the Sikh nation aspires to regain its sovereignty." As well as his throne, Duleep was also forced to hand over the Koh-i-Noor, or Mountain of Light diamond. The fabulous diamond had originally belonged to the Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan, the builder of the Taj Mahal. Taken from Delhi by the invading Persians or Iranians in 1739, it then passed to the rulers of Afghanistan before being surrendered by them to Ranjit Singh after a war in 1813. The Koh-i-Noor was presented to Queen Victoria. Now it's a tad over 106 carats, but it was twice this size when it was originally presented to her, but it was reduced in the 1850s so that she could wear it as a brooch. In 1937, it was incorporated into Queen Elizabeth the Queen Mother's coronation crown. It remains probably the most controversial of Britain's crown jewels. The Battle of Gujrat, 21st of February 1849, is little known by many people, and yet it had such a huge impact. A lost boy Maharaja, a fabulous diamond that's now housed in the Tower of London, the proud and feared Sikh Empire brought down, and the cementing of British control of India for the next 100 years. Gujrat was a battle that changed India forever, and its impact, not least with the crown jewels and calls for an independent Sikh homeland, continues to resonate to this day. We are, after all, products of our history. Well, I hope you enjoyed that story and indeed this whole mini-series on the Anglo-Sikh Wars, and if you've missed any of them, I'll put links in the description. A massive thanks to Stacey, Mark, Rob and Michael for supporting my show, and you can find out how you can support my work in the description below. Thanks for joining me today. Keep well, and I'll see you again very soon.